Okay, so we're finishing up carbohydrates, which is the first of four, remember, macromolecules. But we've already gone over monosaccharides like glucose or disaccharides, remember, like sucrose, which is table sugar, which is glucose and fructose together. And now we're on to polysaccharides, which I think we got halfway through this. Polysaccharides are many sugar units. So if we numbered these off, we see 8 different glucose molecules linked together, which is cellulose. Cellulose makes up the cell wall in a lot of different plants like lettuce and corn, and there's other ones. It's indigestible, so that's a lot of what comes out when you go to the bathroom, being number 2, because it's indigestible by our GI system. Things like starch are polysaccharides as well. They're just going to be structured a little bit differently, and the good thing about starch, bread for the most part is empty calories. It's really not going to hold that much nutritional value for you. But things like pasta, you hear like carb load before a long race. Starch, pasta, like pasta, which is a starch, will give you these long sugar units that will, during the race, you can then break the bonds and release individual glucose molecules that you then can burn. Sometimes a little harder, so the purest form of glucose is just getting like a glucose packet, but that's why you don't want to eat starch during a race. You want to eat it well in advance, so that it's converted from starch into glycogen. Glycogen is our storage form. So when you eat bread, you don't just like put bread into your body. You don't become bread. You need to convert it into something that animals use, which is it's called glycogen. You notice GLYC, like glucose, means sugar. And it's going to go to our muscles, and it's a storage form of sugar within our muscles, which is the best place for it to go, because think of it, that's where we're going to burn the most energy. And what is energy? Our immediate form of energy are carbohydrates. And so we're going to store all of like our starch and simple glucose in our muscles, and whenever we start to work or undergo some type of activity, or even our heart beating, we will use up that glycogen. And the way that we restore it is going to be to eat, to reinsert those bonds. Lipids are the second macromolecule. Some general characteristics about them is they're not soluble in water, so they are non-polar. You know that term from before, which is why they don't mix with water. It's why if you get excuse me, something like oil on your pants or on a shirt, why do you need to worry about that when you're washing it, as opposed to like a dirt stain? Well, dirt is going to be water soluble. Oil or something with oil in it is going to be not water soluble, so you can wash it in hot water, cold water, but because it is hydrophobic, water hating, just like you saw in the macromolecule lab when you try to divide the water with the toothpick and then you put oil on it and it did something different. Hydrophobic oils are going to not mix with water. So fats store energy. So the theory behind trying to burn fat is that you want to exhaust all of your carbohydrate storage and then you'll kick into fat, which is why a lot of people recommend working out in the morning. Because think of it, you're not going to have a huge carb storage when you wake up in the morning, so you would kick right into burning fat, which is what most people want to do. It's really not a bad thing to think that way, but I just want to be clear that fats, it's not healthy to have too much fat. It's not healthy for your heart. Your body has to work harder to feed those cells. It's going to cause plaque in your arteries and veins, which is never good and can cause heart attack or chronic circulatory problems. But we do need fat in our diet. Fat is energy storage, which we need to kick into. It's how we can keep going in a race, even when we burn through all of our simple carbohydrates and our complex carbohydrates, and now we need something else to start burning. Phospholipids are going to be huge components of every single one of our cells. So anybody that says we don't need fat is crazy, because every single one of the cells in your body has a phospholipid membrane. Oils, we have essential oils in our body, and we eat a lot of oils, are going to have fat in them. And then steroids, kind of a controversial topic that most people don't view as controversial, because most people, I would say, subscribe to the notion that steroids in athletics are bad. But what people don't realize is that steroids, most of the steroids that you take, growth hormone is obviously a steroid hormone that we naturally produce. Testosterone, estrogen, androstenedione are all steroids that are naturally occurring in our body that an athlete would take more of. But people think they're like cocaine or heroin or something like that's really bad for you. And while it will have side effects, if our purpose in going to, the Cowboys game or a basketball game or a baseball game is to see something that we ourselves couldn't do, if they, the society today is all about choices, and if you want to do it and it's good for you, then you should be able to do it. I've never understood why. I just want to make this clear. I'm not like pro steroids, but if somebody wants to excel at what they're doing, why shouldn't they have that constitutional right? And I understand competitive balance. Again, I'm against steroids, but people simplify it because they don't understand that steroids, A, are naturally occurring, and B, are just lipid derivatives, fat derivatives in our body that we all have in us. Somebody's just taking more of it. So what's the next thing we're going to do? Start limiting protein shakes or start limiting airborne or other medications that are going to keep you healthy because that's an unfair competitive advantage? I don't know, but it's not as simple as people make it out to be. So lipids, long-term energy storage is the key part. Carbohydrates are short-term versus lipids are long-term. Heat loss, so they keep, they're insulatory. So when we see other animals with a high adipose layer in their skin, it means that they're trying to conserve heat within their body. Prevent physical shock. So we absorb a lot of shock if something hits you in the arm or somebody punches you or you fall. That hypodermal layer right below your skin absorbs a lot of shock. It also prevents desiccation. So we don't want to lose water. We've seen how important water is for homeostasis. So it prevents against water loss. Since it's hydrophobic, water hating, it keeps water inside the body. We drink water, it goes down our esophagus into our blood, but then it's kept inside because of those hydrophobic tails within the phospholipid membrane. Chemical messengers, so hormones all throughout the body. There are so many hormones that communicate with organs to do different things. Or if you eat a sandwich right now and you have sugar in you, you need insulin to actually carry that sugar into the cells. And those insulin is a hormone. Hormones are lipids, examples of lipids. And then membranes, like I said before, are made up of phospholipids, which you can tell by the name is just a phosphate group connected to a lipid molecule. Triglycerides are the building blocks. So we said monosaccharides were the building blocks of carbohydrates. Triglycerides are the building blocks of lipids. And what you can see here, you have a glycerol backbone, and then you've got 3 fatty acid tails. This one happens to be bent, and I'll tell you why it's bent. It's because of the bonding, but I'll show you that in a second. The way that you can always tell a lipid molecule is with carbs. Remember, it was a 1 carbon to 2 hydrogen to 1 oxygen ratio, and that's for carbs. For lipids, you're going to get a huge number of carbons, like 94, and you might get 108 hydrogens to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to 6 oxygens. So you're going to get an enormous number of carbons, which you'll never see in a carbohydrate, an enormous and an even bigger number of hydrogens, and then a very small number of oxygens in the molecule. They're really large molecules, and just visually always look for the 3 tails coming off of it, because again, no carb is going to look like that. You hear a lot about saturated versus unsaturated fatty acids. Maybe you've heard of trans fats, which are really bad for you. The reason we have saturated fat, oils actually, or fats actually occur in liquid form, but in order to solidify them, we're going to add something to them to saturate them, basically add hydrogens to an unsaturated fatty acid so that fats can become solid. So saturated fats occur in things like butter or lard or margarine, things that are solid at room temperature that we as humans have manufactured. It's going to help things taste better. Think of like think of like a cupcake, which you'll add butter to. Yes, you can liquefy butter by heating it up, but think of it, butter will start to solidify. After you heat it up, it'll start to solidify again. Imagine a cupcake that just kind of fell apart because you had just used oil. So a lot of the fats that we have that have saturated fats in them are going to have no double bonds. So if we look back at this, I'm going to go back to the last slide. Notice that this whole line is completely straight because there are no double bonds. This one as well, and double bonds, you can see there's a double bond connected to the oxygen. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking the C to H chains, the fatty acid chains. Notice that there's no double bonds in that one. However, notice that there's a double bond right there that causes, just always look for the bend in the fatty acid chain, and you'll know that it is an unsaturated fat. Unsaturated fats are better for us because they're easier to break down in the body. We can break that fatty acid at the double bond. You probably heard of like polyunsaturated fats, which are good for you, versus trans fats are going to be all saturated and really hard to break down, and it'll start to clog your arteries if you don't exercise a lot, and even if you have a really high fat diet, you'll start to get deposits of fat all throughout your body. So you can see the double bond right there. So visually, under a microscope, that fatty acid chain will start to bend. Proteins are the third of 4 macromolecules, and they're made up. The monomer is amino acids, so now we have monosaccharides, we have triglycerides, and then now we have amino acids. There are 20 different types, and so we're going to build these. Amino acids are huge, by the way. They're huge structures. Amino acid is just the common name. We're going to build those together based on our 4th macromolecule, which is DNA and RNA, are nucleic acids. Those are the instructions on how to disassemble and reassemble proteins back into our genes. You hear that term genes. Gene is just a segment of DNA that codes for how to rebuild protein into you. When you eat a hamburger today, turkey, beans, nuts, whatever it is with protein in it, we are not made of the protein from nuts. What we will do is maybe nuts have 1, 6, 8, and 14 amino acids, and hamburger has 2, 7, 13, 19, and 20. Well, our gene says that in order to make hair color, we need 1, 2, and 6. Well, we break these down. We're going to break all of these down into individual amino acids, and now I just rebuild them based on the DNA sequencing back into 1, 2, and 6, and that codes for your brown hair color. So we build proteins, every solid structure in your body, your nails, hair, organs, brain, whatever you want, muscle, whatever you want, it's all made of protein. So I would say anything structural, muscles, anything in our body that is solid is made of protein. It's why you'll never hear of a diet saying eat less protein. Never in the past, never present, and never in the future, because every part of us is made of protein. Hemoglobin, so like our blood, the oxygen carrying part of our blood, some hormones have a protein component to them, and then storage as well. We can store protein to build structures if we don't have enough. And then cell reactions, remember every reaction that happens in our body is going to require an enzyme, and enzymes oversee all the cellular reactions that happen. So proteins, more than anything else, are so incredibly important in your diet. That's why if you're a vegetarian, you need to make sure that you supplement your vegetables with things that have protein in them, like tofu, like nuts, like legumes, and like beans. And there are other things as well. Amino acids are just bonded together with peptide bonds. Anytime you see PEP, like Pepto-Bismol, it's always going to imply protein. So each of these is a peptide bond. And again, amino acids are really, really big. This is just a visual representation showing you a bunch of amino acids linked together. Finally, nucleic acids are the 4th of 4 macromolecules. There are 2 types, DNA and RNA, deoxyribonucleic acid based on the sugar involved and that it forms a double helix, and RNA is going to be a helper for DNA, helping it copy itself when DNA is transferred cell to cell. RNA is going to help DNA just be transferred in the copying process. We'll go deep into that later in the year. Nucleic acids are just composed of nucleotides, so that's the fourth monomer. Again, I'll repeat them: monosaccharides for carbohydrates, triglycerides for lipids, amino acids for proteins, and now nucleotides for nucleic acids. They include a phosphate group, a pentose sugar, and then nitrogenous bases. And these are the four nitrogenous bases for DNA. And then I'm going to number on the other side. These are the nitrogenous bases for RNA. So they look very similar, DNA and RNA do, except for the type of sugar is slightly different. Ribose sugar versus deoxyribo sugar is going to be different, and then that nitrogenous base is different. You can see the general structure for a nucleotide, and so remember our carbs, C6H12O6 are very basic looking. Our fats are going to have those three chains, some saturated, some unsaturated. Our proteins are going to have those amino acids, which we'll look at the structure more in detail when we get to DNA. And then this thing, always look for the house, look for a circle off to the side, which is a phosphate group. And then this is going to be the nitrogenous base, so C, G, A, or T, depending on if it's cytosine, guanine, adenine, or thymine. That will indicate what the shape of this nitrogenous base will be, but we're not going to get into those particulars. Again, this chapter is about setting really important things up for the rest of the year.